Hey everybody, it's Atheist for the Cause here, and I wanted to bring you this video by the Young Turks and do a video response about a fire that was set to a Muslim teen's memorial. But of course, you can never take what the Young Turks says at face value, so I wanted to get another article here for, some actual evidence, because you never know the bullshit the Young Turks is going to try to spew. They rarely give you the full story. So it says, South Carolina man sets fire to memorial for slain Virginia teen Nebra Hassanin. I'll go through this article, a couple other points, and then get to the Young Turks video response. It says, a South Carolina man has been arrested for setting fire to a memorial for slain Virginia teen Nebra Hassanin. Washington, D.C. residents gathered at the Capitol's DuPont Circle on Tuesday night to grieve the 17-year-old who was walking back to her mosque in Fairfax County when she was attacked and possibly sexually assaulted by a road rage driver. Possibly sexually assaulted? Let's wait until we know whether she was sexually assaulted or not before we just throw that out there. D.C. police confirmed to the Daily News that officers were called Wednesday morning after fire was set to a memorial at a fountain, which is pretty fucked up, wouldn't you say? I mean, when it comes to, like, a murder or something, sometimes there can be gray area, whether it was self-defense or not, or things like that. But when it comes to, starting a memorial on fire, that is almost never a gray area. It's almost always black and white. It's almost always, bullshit. So it says a spokeswoman said that Jonathan Solomon, a 24-year-old from South Carolina, has been arrested just after 10 a.m. and added, at this time, the incident does not appear to be motivated by bias. He was arrested for vandalism, according to the U.S. Parks Police, who is handling the investigation. Sergeant Anna Rose, who said in a statement that the fountain did not suffer any permanent damage, did not have information on why Solomon was in D.C. or around the memorial to the Virginia teen. Nabra was walking back to the mosque for late-night prayers with her friends when she was attacked early Sunday morning, and the fact that she was wearing traditional Muslim clothing made her family suspect that her death was a hate crime. I mean, it's fine to suspect that, but then you have to actually find some evidence of it, and if there's no evidence of it, then you can't look at it as a hate crime. However, Fairfax County Police said Monday that Darwin Torres, a 22-year-old El Salvador native suspected of being in the U.S. illegally, appeared to be... This is a really important paragraph, so I'm going to go back over it and make sure you keep this in your mind for future reference in this video. However, Fairfax County Police said Monday that Darwin Torres, a 22-year-old El Salvador native suspected of being in the U.S. illegally, he's an illegal alien, or is at least suspected of being at this time, appeared to be motivated by road rage rather than hatred towards Nabra's faith. Torres allegedly argued with one of the boys with Nabra and chased the teens with a baseball bat before catching and assaulting his victim. Muslim advocacy groups have said that authorities should continue to look into the possibility of bias. And I also have no problem with this. I'm all for it. Look into the possibility of bias. Look into the possibility that this was a hate crime. That's fine, but don't call it a hate crime unless there's evidence of it. Nabra's body was also found in a pond in neighboring Loudoun County, with authorities saying she was assaulted there a second time. Police told, well, I'm assuming she was, since, she was killed, and she was assaulted, abducted, and to my knowledge still alive, so that's what they made it sound like. So she would have had to be assaulted a second time to be killed. The police told WTTG on Tuesday that they are investigating whether she was sexually assaulted in one of the attacks. I know they're investigating this. I haven't found anything on that like why they think she was sexually assaulted. Maybe it stems from the confrontation, but I don't know. Like I haven't seen any evidence that this was like a sexual assault issue. But a funeral for Nabra was planned for Wednesday afternoon. I mean, it doesn't hurt to look into it, but a funeral for Nabra has planned for Wednesday afternoon at the Al Doulas Area Muslim Society Center, the popular mosque where she and her friends were walking before the attack. By the way, in this situation, she really just sounds like, to me, from what the different articles have described, she sounds like just, you know, your typical teenager. Like, I remember doing stuff like this when I was younger, although I was an atheist at the time and I am an atheist now, but I would go to these youth groups with some of my friends as like a social event, and then like afterwards or beforehand we'd go and get something to eat, and you know, then we'd go like to a park or something. That's kind of like what they were doing. They went to this Muslim Society Center, and then they went and ended up going to like a McDonald's to get something to eat, and we're just hanging out. A launch good page for Nabra's family had raised more than $314,000 as of early Wednesday afternoon. Abraham Hooper, a spokesperson, and keep this in mind because this is some Young Turks bullshit is going to come up in regards, and this is going to disprove it. Abraham Hooper, a spokesman for the Council on American Islamic Relations, attended the funeral and said that Nabra's death has brought profound grief both in the local Muslim community and others around the country. He said that he was not sure what to make of the DuPont Circle memorial fire, but added, "The community is already on edge because of the tragic and brutal murder of our sister. This only adds to the tension, no matter what the motive." And, you know, I think this is the perfect message. We're not sure what it is, you know, why it was done, but it doesn't help the situation, and tensions are rising. I mean, the community is on edge. I think it has the right to be, and I'm actually quite intrigued by how they handled this, and I think they handled it perfectly. It's the media that has gone batshit insane with this. Did I say apeshit? I meant apeshit batshit insane. Now here's an article that explains more about the situation, but I did this video before, although it was missing some audio, so it got a little long, so I'm going to kind of cut it down a little bit. So basically, the important part here is Martinez Torres was arraigned Monday and denied bail pending a July 19th court appearance. A judge appointed him a public defender whose office declined comment. Immigration authorities put a detainer on him, saying he's a citizen of El Salvador and there's probable cause to believe he lacks permission to be in the U.S. So, probably an illegal alien, just like the last article said. And it's got a lot of the same facts. Road rage was an issue here. In fact, it's titled, "Police, Road Rage Led to Bat Attack, Muslim Teen's Death." So, but, you know, what does the Independent have to say about this? Let's read the headline. Donald Trump. Wait, what? What the fuck? How did Donald Trump get into this? Donald Trump fails to address terror attack on London mosque and murdered Muslim woman. Oh God, here we go. Find anything that happens to a Muslim or by a Muslim has to be somehow connected to Donald fucking Trump. So, I'm not going to go through this whole bullshit article, but the president's critics have argued that while he is often quick to condemn acts of terrorism carried out by Muslims, his reaction to terrorism committed by white people is anything but swift. White people, let's go back. Let's go back. So, Darwin Martinez Torres. This guy. This Latino-looking guy. This non-white looking guy with the non-white and generally name. It sounds like a Latino name. And we have reason to believe he's a citizen of El Salvador with probable cause to believe he lacks permission to be in the fucking United States. He's an illegal alien, as far as we know. So, but it gets better. What does Sean fucking King, hired by the Young Turks, have to say about this? Nothing from Trump, the writer and activist Sean King tweeted in response to Justin Trudeau's condolences due London. He tends to generally not mind when white men kill or maim people, particularly if they kill Muslims. Well, first of all, in the London attack, there was either maybe one death, or there were no deaths in that attack. But the White House actually did come out and say that, you know, they condemned the attack. And, I mean, they speak on behalf of Trump, so, and, well, Trump's administration. So, this is extremely misleading. And in regards to this other attack, it had nothing to do with white people. It was literally an attack against a Muslim by a El Salvadoran illegal alien in the U.S. You know, those illegal aliens that people like Sean King want to make sanctuary cities and sanctuary counties and sanctuary states, sanctuary this, sanctuary that, allow all these people to come in and just break the law because there's nothing wrong with that. And then when they commit attacks, you know, don't deport them, right? That's what you guys want. You just want all of these people who commit crimes at higher rates to come into the country. And what do you know? Just like Trump has been fighting against insane, they actually commit attacks against minority groups more than white people, more than Christians. They're going to commit attacks against minorities. So, I would say that instead of blaming Donald Trump, maybe you should embrace some of his policies, like the solar wall, and, you know, let's, you know, boost our police presence in these areas. Let's boost our border security agent. Yeah, and Trump campaign on it, I haven't heard much about it recently, but I'd like to see it pushed through an e-verify system where businesses are forced to verify whether their employees are actual citizens or not, or here legally or not. And, you know, this would prevent some of these illegal alien attacks on minorities and would actually protect minorities. So Donald Trump's policies, the man you're attacking, would have actually helped prevent this killing. So fuck you, Sean King. Fuck you, the Young Turks. And fuck you, the Independent. You guys are pieces of shit. Now, let's get into the real winners. So this is how this video is going to go. We're going to start out with a relatively, you know, solid issue and some solid facts. And this is kind of how the Young Turks typically operates. It's not going to be any different than the past. Then they're going to take it and they're going to start to get a little sketchy with it. And then they're going to go full out batshit insane for like half of the video. So just watch for that progression, because it's like, this is how you take an obviously sad situation that almost the entire country would, you know, would be against this memorial starting on fire and the killing of this woman. or this teenager, she was 17, she wasn't even a woman yet. Everybody is on board with that. You know, every reasonable person besides the extreme fringe. And now you're going to take this and you're going to make it into bullshit where the majority of the population isn't even going to agree with what you have to say because you're just so batshit insane about it. This is what pisses people off and why nobody trusts you anymore.
This weekend, 17-year-old Nabra Hassanin was abducted and murdered after leaving a mosque early in the morning. And
terrible. We condemn the attack. This is a horrible thing. There's no way to get around it. And I'm actually, you know, I was planning on making a video about, you know, attacks against Muslims that have happened recently with this there was a London attack that the Independent brought up, and that was in the UK. There's this attack, and there was an attack in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was gonna, you know, bring up a couple of attacks to condemn these, and then I came across this video, and I just had to make this one instead, to correct the record on you guys, and I'm still covering these issues, but you're making it so much harder to show that, you know, Muslims are facing some legitimate issues. And I'm not blaming Trump for that because I'm a reasonable person. But it's, you know, it has a lot to do with wars that are going on and, you know, jihad around the world. It has a lot to do with, you know, people feeling attacked themselves, and there is a fringe element that I don't think anyone would deny, that like the KKK type of white, and there's a white supremacist fringe. By the way, like there's a black supremacist fringe also that doesn't particularly like a lot of minorities that you guys think they might. And there's like constant gang wars among like blacks who tend to be Muslims tend to be, you know, black a lot of times, and there's a, you know, huge gang attacks between Latinos and blacks. There's all these kinds of issues, but you just want to blame Trump and make it seem like some simple thing when it's so much, there's so much more to it than that, and Trump really is not responsible for these attacks.
Now, to add insult to injury.
And neither is his rhetoric. If you really listen to what Trump says, it's inclusive of everybody, and there are Muslims who like Trump as well, and there are a lot of Muslims who feel protected by Trump by not allowing, you know, mass immigration of basically people from areas that have Muslims that want to kill people, you know, Muslims who already came here, like defected here, so that, you know, and now they would be killed basically by other Muslims, because there's a huge like Muslim on Muslim hate and Muslim on Muslim confrontation violence. That's a huge thing. And now multiculturalists, and I say that in the global sense where, you know, people think we should accept all cultures as equal, want to bring in like all these masses amounts of immigrants that like many of them want to commit jihad and things like that. And that's just factual. It's not like demonizing them. Sure, there are many good ones that have nothing to do with jihad or anything like that, but we've seen like the France attack where they literally went through the refugee program, and it led to like hundreds of people being killed or injured in an attack. And you know, even if like 0.1% or even 0.01% of the people who came in were jihadist extremists, Hillary Clinton, who was, you know, the alternative to Trump, and I think it's reasonable to compare the policies, What she wanted to do was bring in 500,000 a year. 500,000. Do you know that what that would do to certain communities? It would destroy them. Because you're not going to spread these people out evenly throughout the country. They're going to congregate in a few cities. And it's going to create ghettos and mass violence. And, you know, you're going to get Sharia law. And they're going to attempt to set up Sharia law like they attempted to do in Texas. And it's going to be horrible.
Just several days after that happened, a memorial was established for Nabra, and someone went this morning and set it on fire. DC police confirmed to the
And that's horrible. You know, none of us agree with this.
Daily News that officers were called Wednesday morning after fire was set to the memorial at a fountain. A spokeswoman said that Jonathan Solomon, a 24-year-old from South Carolina, had been arrested just after 10 a.m.
By the way, I looked for his race, Jonathan Solomon. I couldn't find a race, so it makes me assume that he's not white. So just because I think if he was white, the Young Turks would have been all over that, saying he was, but they never say he's white. None of the other articles say he's white. So at this point, I have to assume he's not white, especially with the last name like Solomon, where you know, that tends to be a non-white last name.
That at this time, the incident does not appear to be motivated by bias. Come on. And so
yeah, that's what the fucking police said. And they did an actual investigation. And, you know, the information they had is there was no reason to believe it was motivated by bias. Imagine that. Huh, laugh all you want. The fucking evidence is in the way of our narrative again.
Reached out to the police department to try to find out if, they keep saying South Carolina, did this person travel to there, and I have not been able to have it been confirmed at this point.
Yes, the person came from South Carolina to Virginia. Or to DC. So DC, Virginia, it's kind of all the same area.
I would argue that regardless of whether he lived in that area or he traveled expressly to set fire to it, there's some bias involved in that.
Yeah.
You don't know he traveled there to set fire to it. You're just making that up. And sure, there, you know, you think there's some bias. You started with this idea that there was bias, and then the evidence didn't bear that out, and now you're doubling down on it. But you just, when in the face of a lack of evidence, you have to start to change your mind, especially when the police are starting to come out and say, hey, this actually wasn't a hate crime, or we have no reason to believe it was a hate crime at this point.
He wasn't just looking to start a fire and the memorial was there.
So in the case of the original death of Hassanin in this case, there is some dispute as to why it happened. So
yeah.
Originally, unsurprisingly, people thought it was a hate crime because they were on their way to a mosque. They were wearing headscarves, at least certainly Nabarra was. And so...
By the way, this is one part I kind of disagreed with the logic of the family. The family basically said that, in one of the parts of the article I didn't read, that they believed it was a hate crime because she wore traditional clothing. But usually Muslims who wear traditional clothing always wear traditional clothing. So, you know, that means that if any Muslim, traditional Muslim who is killed is going to be pretty much in traditional clothing. So, I mean, you really need more than that to determine it as a hate crime. I mean, you can always say, you know, Muslims are persecuted at a higher rate or something, so there's a higher risk of this being a hate crime. I actually have no problem with that. I think there is a problem with, you know, people being hateful towards Muslims to an extent, but to a higher extent of other races right now. But, you know, I'm not going to go and assume it's a hate crime every time a Muslim in traditional clothing is killed or injured.
Given the climate in America, people made the reasonable assumption that it was related to a hate crime, which is...
Exactly, an assumption. See, this is where a minute 30 in, it's still not too bad. We're just starting to get from the facts, and it's going to start to transition into the gray area pretty quickly here, and then batshit insane for like half the video.
There's a couple of them that were in the news very, very recently.
Very recently, yes.
Now, authorities say that might not be the case, that it might have been road rage. Now, it's a weird.
And by the way, some of these other attacks that they're talking about, they're really going from outside the United States for some of them. Like the attack was in London with where the guy used a vehicle to run down some people, and that was a response attack to, you know, because there had been a few Muslim attacks on British people where they'd used vehicles to go and run people over. One happened on a bridge. Even the one where there was the bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, there was a vehicle that they like crashed into the building and then set off a couple bombs.
They're kind of road rage because he chased them with a baseball bat. It seemed like they weren't in the car, so I don't know why he was.
No, they had been walking home from the. No.
Yes, because believe it or not, road rage happens all the time where people who are driving get pissed off at people who are walking for whatever reason. They take too long, they cross in front of someone, or, you know, and there's all kinds of road rage at people who walk.
Home, walking to the mosque from an IHOP. He had either been driving, it's not immediately clear if he was parked and they were nearby. They said that he pulled over onto,
That was from a McDonald's,
I believe, the sidewalk. So he had either been driving or they passed him and he drove to catch up, something like that. Yeah. And had an argument, came out with a metal
It's kind of weird how, like, they clearly did some research to know this kind of information. You know, they probably read an article about it. And yet, or maybe they listened to, like, the press conference about it. And yet they don't really understand the situation. Like, they're so confused about it. What's so confusing?
Baseball bat.
And abducted her. And then
after hitting her, yeah.
Yeah, and then God knows what happened afterwards.
He is referencing potential sexual assault there that we don't actually know happened. They're just investigating whether it happened. I think just because of the whether, you know, probably because she's a woman, or you know, it's a girl and a guy, and they probably it's something worth investigating. And he was, I wonder what was said in that argument. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, they're calling it road rage. That's what makes it confusing. But he got in an altercation, an argument with the boy, remember, that she was with. So, I mean, could it have been some sort of fight over the girl? Like, was he interested in the girl or something? That they're thinking that there was sexual assault. I don't think so, because they're billing this as road rage, but you never know what the police know and aren't saying. But until I have a reason to believe, or evidence that there was sexual assaults, I'm not going to take the position that there was.
Afraid to find out.
They're still investigating.
Yeah, and her body was found later in the day in a nearby pond. So either way, second-degree murder is the charge, and they're investigating him, and hopefully he'll be punished to the maximum extent. Now,
thankfully they caught him very quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Great job by the authorities in finding him.
Believe it or not, what do you know? The police step up for anybody who's in trouble. This was a Muslim who was killed, and the police came in under Donald Trump's administration. I'm not saying he's responsible for it, but, you know, it's not like there's some sort of policy where they say don't investigate Muslim murders or anything. So they came in and, like, solved this crime really quickly. What do you know? The police help anybody who's in trouble. They'll go and try to solve any murder case that, you know, that comes across their desk. It's almost like society isn't, you know, completely against minorities. It's almost like the police aren't completely against blacks or Muslims, like is often made out to be.
Now, turning to burning down the memorial, who accidentally burns down a memorial?
Now we're getting into, you know, batshit crazy stuff. Who said that this was accidentally burned down? The police never said that. They said it wasn't bias, or they have no evidence that it was bias. They never ever said that this was an accident, ever.
Or burns down a memorial for someone, but it doesn't have anything to do with the memorial.
It doesn't have anything to do with it.
Nobody said that it didn't have anything to do with the memorial. What do you know? They're making up their own shit, their own facts for their own narrative.
Like what? So somebody drove from South Carolina to do a random act of, like, is a pyro and was like, I don't like burning things in South Carolina. I want to drive all the way over here.
It's the first flammable thing he saw on the news.
Yeah.
What in the first? I mean, I don't mean to laugh in a serious situation like this, because this is really sad, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. But how can you not laugh at this stupid motherfucker?
So that seems super weird to me. In fact, if it's the same authorities, who, again, credit to them for catching them, telling me that the memorial being burned down is coincidence, and they're also telling me that—
No, they never fucking told you it was a coincidence, you dumb fucking liar.
their initial crime is also a coincidence.
Yeah.
It makes me question whether—
No, they never said the first crime, the murder, was a coincidence either. Saying something was not due to bias, or there's no evidence that it was due to bias, does not mean that it is a fucking coincidence. Where is this leap coming from? How did they think this was a good idea? And, you know, I think there's a lot of, you know, there still are some, the Young Turks fans, although many are defecting. But, you know, there are actually a lot of progressives that are starting to attack the Young Turks, and they're in some serious trouble in terms of loyalty and of their viewers. Like, if it wasn't for hate watchers, they would be in even more trouble. But you know, I would say most of their audience that even likes them and, you know, and watches them regularly, even they are seeing through this kind of bullshit. Like, because I've talked to a lot of them in, you know, in the live chat and stuff, and a lot of them will defend the Young Turks, but they won't take on this bullshit. They just think that despite this stupid logic, there's still good logic out there, and the Young Turks are covering good issues, is kind of their position.
Whether their initial crime was actually a coincidence or road rage, or if it was a hate crime.
It's a whole bunch of coincidences, apparently.
That's right.
No, these are coincidences you guys made up out of thin air. The points that you said that it was all coincidence. The police weren't saying that. You know, nobody believes it was a coincidence. Nobody else is saying it was a coincidence. This is something, there's no articles saying that I could find saying it was a coincidence. You two are making this narrative up as you go along. I don't even think you have these notes jotted down. You're just kind of winging this. And for some reason, this popped into your head.
So look, you got to investigate that stuff and find out. And as this stuff is fresh, there'll be a lot of miscommunication. Things will settle down. And hopefully, we'll get some real answers. But it would be very, very surprising if a
hopefully we'll get some real answers, because the answers we have right now are fake. I mean, not everything is solved yet, but I mean, they have a pretty good idea that it was due to road rage. But, you know, that's not a real answer, because it's not the answer the Young Turks likes, because it doesn't have bias in it, because it's not a hate crime.
Memorial to this Muslim girl who was killed was burned down for anything other than that it was a memorial to a Muslim woman who, I mean, who else would burn down a memorial to anyone else?
To anyone. Yeah.
You fucking, exactly. Who would burn down a memorial to anyone? Like, isn't that kind of defeating your own argument that, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a hate crime just because she was Muslim? Like, anybody's memorial that was burned down would be fucked up. I mean, it has nothing to do with them being Muslim. There's no evidence that it was burned down because she was a Muslim or anything like that. Now, if we find out that information later, then fine, turn it into a hate crime. But why it's right now they're calling it vandalism. I have no problem with that. And they can upgrade it later as they interrogate this guy if they find out that there was some hatred there, or, you know, they don't even remember. The Young Turks themselves said they don't even know why this guy was around the memorial. And the other articles said that as well. Like, they don't know why this guy was here. They don't know if this fire was, if he drove up to go to the memorial, if he just happened to be around the memorial. I don't even know if he knew it was a memorial at this point, to be honest. That wasn't made clear in any of the articles.
Regardless of what drove the initial crime, this guy seems to have had some sort of bias.
Yeah.
And I guess just because of what...
At least they're kind of breaking away from the idea that the initial crime had to be a bias or a hate crime. Like, he's kind of backpedaling there a little bit. And I actually agree that it's more likely that the burning of the memorial is a hate crime rather than the killing. But that doesn't mean either one of them has to be a hate crime. And I have no reason to believe at this point it was a hate crime, so I'm not going to take that position on.
What's been happening internationally in the past couple of weeks? It bothers me. It should bother everyone. Remember Donald Trump?
It does bother everyone, like outside of a few batshit insane crazy people.
Tried to spread that myth that after 9/11 there were Muslims on the rooftops cheering. This idea that,
oh yeah, gotta get Trump in here. And there were Muslims around the world who were cheering the attack. And we actually don't know that Trump was completely wrong. We just, the mainstream media, or in media in general, has not been able to find the clip Trump was talking about. And so this could be like an honest mistake. And they're trying to make it sound like nefarious or something, or whatever. But this was basically, remember back when Trump said during 9/11 that Muslims were in New Jersey watching the fire and cheering. And I kind of, I feel like I kind of remember that. I don't know if it's like a false memory. I swear to God, though, I remember something like that. But I don't know. To me, it doesn't really matter. And it seems like nobody can find the video he's talking about or whatever. But I also, if anybody did find it, as much as the mainstream media hates them, I wouldn't be surprised if they scrubbed it, because they love to do that kind of stuff too. So, but yeah, I think it's if people want to say it didn't happen, I don't have a huge problem with that. But it's not like Trump was doing this in a nefarious way, so he was wrong on something. I mean, get over it.
Terrible act happens, people die, and some group takes joy in that. It didn't actually happen, but he was spreading that idea. And here you have this
Well,
girl...
Muslims around the world, like jihadis in the Middle East, and not even just jihadis, Islamists and regular Muslims who, actually support terrorism at an alarming rate and support attacks against the United States at an extremely high rate. We're actually cheering that the U.S. was attacked.
Killed. Some people apparently are fans of that. They like it. There were...
The main question here is whether there were Muslims in New Jersey who did it as well. We don't know that that actually happened. We know it just happened in other parts of the world.
The Muslim worshippers leaving in London that were driven down by the guy in the van trying to kill as many Muslims as possible. And the son...
Yeah, that's not even in the fucking United States. It's not even in the United States.
Of the owner of
And it was like a revenge killing. I mean, I went over that before, but basically it was, you know, it was a copycat revenge killing because Muslims had been attacking the British population with vehicles and running people over. It happened multiple times. So finally someone did it back to the Muslims. And this is the problem with identity politics. Because you say, oh, Muslims are attacking us with vehicles, I'm going to show them and attack them with vehicles. But the thing is, when you attack back in that revenge way, that's also wrong because you're attacking people who are innocent. And just because they're Muslim and people who committed terror attacks were Muslim doesn't mean that you're attacking the same people. And, you know, this is the type of identity politics, ironically, that the Young Turks absolutely loves. You know, white versus black people, for instance. They pit that all the time. And as you can see, Sean King, who works for the Young Turks, he pitted that in the Independent article. He was bringing up white people. And it's just bullshit. Like, even, you know, I'm a Trump supporter, and I don't agree with that terror attack against the Muslims in London. But I certainly don't see how that has anything to do with the United States or, you know, Donald Trump or anything like that. Like, what the fuck are you bringing this up for? Let me guess, you're going to attack Christians too, right? Because every time there's an attack by Muslims or against Muslims, you will bring up Christians and white people. So,
the van company says he wishes that they had rented him a tank or a steamroller instead.
Yeah, and that's fucked up. That the person who rented the vehicle wishes they rented a bigger vehicle to these people. That's fucked up. Like, we're not in favor of that.
Glorifying the fact that the killing happened. There's Facebook pages filled with positive comments after events like this happen, and for some reason that's not supposed to be a problem. That's just it's just a couple.
Who says something like that isn't a problem? You're not even talking about an event that happened in the United States.
Couple of bad seeds. We're not supposed to be disturbed by the fact that when you kill Muslims, people are allowed to cheer.
Well, legally they're allowed to cheer in the United States, but basically society would ostracize them. You know, people legally are allowed to cheer the killing of white people or the killing of any other group of people, but that doesn't mean that society accepts any of that activity.
Allowed to be happy, they're allowed to call for more violence, and we're not supposed to be.
Sure, people are allowed to be happy legally. They're allowed, well, they're not allowed to call for more violence legally if it's a sort of threat or inciting violence. But, you know, there are free speech issues, and sometimes people can, like, imply violence and get away with it. So, and that would be legal. But, like, overall, any of this activity he's talking about, society would not accept. And he's trying to make it sound like, oh, when this happens to white people and Christian people and, you know, majority people, it's not accepted. But then when it happens to, you know, Muslim people, suddenly everybody is okay with it. It's like, fuck off, John. It's so, you can be further from the truth.
Be disturbed about that.
We are disturbed. We are disturbed about these killings. We're disturbed about a memorial being put on fire.
Lone wolves. And
just tons of lone wolves collecting together and talking about how.
Okay, well, you're mocking this, but who was operating with the Muslim or with the attacker on the against the Muslim? It was like, to my knowledge, it was this one El Salvadorian guy who was an illegal alien. He wasn't even supposed to be in the United States. Who was, I have no knowledge that he was operating with anybody. And the police have no knowledge of that. You have no knowledge of that. The person who lit the memorial on fire, who was he operating with? You have no knowledge that he was operating with anybody. I have no knowledge he was operating with anybody. The police have no knowledge he was operating with anybody. So yes, these are legitimate lone wolf attacks.
Awesome killing Muslims is.
Yeah, and remember, Islam is dangerous and violent. So that's why you should set their memorials on.
Okay, first of all, just because something or someone is dangerous and violent does not mean that someone's memorial should be started on fire. I know you're being sarcastic, but you're being sarcastic in a way we agree with you on. Like, you're trying to attack people like who are like Trump supporters or Trump himself by saying, you know, people like us would agree with you know, a memorial being started on fire. It's not true. We don't. And second of all, I forgot what. Let me go back.
Remember, Islam is dangerous and
Oh
violent.
yeah, about Islam. Saying Islam is dangerous. Well, the people who have Islamic faith and Islamic ideology, they are violent at higher rates and commit terror attacks at higher rates than in the name of their religion and ideology than other religions and ideologies. Islam is basically the most violent, you know, the people who follow Islam are in general, like not the individuals, as a group, are the most violent. Or if they're not the most violent, they're up there, but I'm pretty sure they're like the most violent compared to like Christians or Jews or other groups of people.
Violent. So that's why you should set their memorials on fire.
Exactly.
And if you're in London, you should run them over with a truck because they're dangerous.
What does that have? You even said it yourself. You know it was in London, not the United States. Isn't it kind of weak when you have to use an attack in London because you can't come up with enough attacks that happened in the United States?
And violent.
That's what I'm learning.
Or perhaps it could be that extremists on both sides are dangerous and violent because they're extremists and fundamentalists.
I actually agree with that. But you cannot equate these because the extremists on one side it's a far larger percentage of the population than the extremists on the other side. Like the extremists within Islam are, you know, the people within Islam, I should say, are extremists at a far greater population or far greater rate. Now, the extremists on the Christian side are considerably lower in terms of percentage, and the extremists on the Jewish side is probably even lower than the Christians. And you have all kinds of other religions, and in almost every case, or if not every single case, the extremists make up a smaller portion of that religion than in Islam. And pure research, it's not just me talking out of my ass. You can look up all these different Pew Research polls, and they all, or like lots of other types of polls that have come out, and they all show the same thing, that people within Islam are accepting terror attacks and attacks against the United States, and if they wouldn't be willing to carry out terror attacks, they would still support terror attacks at a great rate, and the evidence is there.
And that what's driving the violence is the extremism, and not whether they happen to be Christian or Muslim, white, or any.
By the way, these different, you know, the books are not all equal either. Like the books within Islam are pretty clear cut. Unlike in Christianity, like there might be some implications that women are, you know, mean less than men or something like that. You could draw that conclusion, but but within the books in under Islam, it like specifically states that it specifically states that a man is worth half of, or that a woman is worth half of a man. Like, it puts it in mathematical figures for you.
Anything else?
Yeah.
No, that's crazy talk. Let's go back to doing the thing we're really good at. Picking a minority and blaming them for all the problems, and then feeling really good about ourselves. And then if they
so you know, to go back to what this article is, or what this video is supposed to be about, just think about how far right now we are from what this is about. Fire set to Muslim teens memorial. Somehow we're talking about how minority groups are scapegoated, and how, you know, all, you know, basically all religions have extremists, and like we're so far from what this video is supposed to be about.
The minorities attacked, saying I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and
I don't have anything to do with this attack. What the fuck are you talking about? Donald Trump doesn't have anything to do with this attack. In fact, Donald Trump has made specific comments that he supports Muslims, that, you know, he's against mass immigration. He's against illegals being here in an undocumented manner. But if Muslims are here as U.S. citizens, he has no problem with them. He specifically stated that. There are lots of Muslim supporters. So even some of his advisors are Muslims. Like, Trump has no problem with Muslims as a whole.
And people are just so scared now that they will, like, the idea. So I read, there was an analysis that said the chance that you'll be killed in a terror attack committed.
Keep in mind, I think we're starting to lose focus here, John. This was not a hate crime. There's no evidence this was a hate crime at this point. Not the murder, nor the memorial burning. And what you're really talking about here is the murder. You've gotten away from the memorial. You're talking mostly about the murder. And there's the most evidence that the murder wasn't a hate crime. It was a road rage incident.
By a refugee is one in, I believe it was.
How the fuck are we talking about refugees now? I mean, if you want to talk about illegal aliens, that's one thing, because this actually involved an illegal alien. There were no refugees here. This Muslim was a American citizen. So I think isn't that a little fucking, I don't know, I don't want to say dehumanizing, but is it disrespectful that, you know, just because she's a Muslim, now you're comparing her to, like, refugees? She's an American. That's how I see her. Who happens to be a fucking Muslim. Who cares? Like, I wouldn't care if she was a fucking Christian, a fucking atheist, whatever. Her religion doesn't matter. She's an American.
It's $3.4 billion a year, but a random 17-year-old girl deserves to die.
Nobody said she deserves to die. This wasn't even a hate crime, like I said.
The leap that it takes mentally to get to that point, and this is not
projection much?
Not a rare leap. I mean, maybe not a lot of people will act on it. Maybe
no, you make this leap almost every day, don't you, John? This just like batshit insane narrative that you came up with out of thin air that has nothing to do with the actual situation, that is completely crazy, that nobody would believe, is a leap that you made here and make almost every day.
Maybe not a lot of people will kill Nabra. Maybe not a lot of people will set her memorial on fire. But for everyone who does one of those.
So let me get this straight. Not a lot of people would do the two things that happened in this situation that you're talking about. But you're going to attack like the majority of society for accepting it. What in the fuck?
Those two things, there are a lot of people who are happy that it's happening, and that is incredibly disturbing. Thankfully, a Launch Good page was set up for Nabra's family, who's still in the very beginning of their grieving, and it's raised more than $314,000 for them as of early Wednesday afternoon.
Never gonna bring.
Huh. 314,000. Remember, it was also from that other article I showed you. That was raised. Now, keep in mind, this whole time they've been setting up that society doesn't support Muslims. They're accepting of, you know, attacks against Muslims, and they're accepting of Muslims Muslim memorials being set on fire. But yet society came up with $314,000 to help this family because of the pain and suffering and just barbaric acts that this family and community had to endure. It had to endure. 314,000. That's pretty damn good. You know, that's a lot of fucking money. And it doesn't, you know, bring back the father's child or anything like that, but that can do a lot for, you know, not only having a better funeral and making sure that, you know, the funeral costs are all covered and all of that, but, you know, just making sure the family is set and that, you know, maybe if they have to take work off or something, they can do that and help them grieve. And, you know, money doesn't solve the situation, but there are things money can do to help lessen the negative impact, because you can take time to grieve.
Their daughter back. It's
it's
tragic any way you slice it.
It is tragic. Everybody thinks it's tragic. So let me get this straight. Between Sean King, who works for the Young Turks, he blamed white people. You guys brought up Christian attacks and white people here as well because of the attack in London, and just in general, you made it seem like you brought up refugees and like violence of refugees, and for some reason and talking about how refugees aren't violent and all of that. You didn't bring up, you know, how this man wasn't white and he wasn't a refugee and the victim wasn't a refugee. She was an American citizen. He is an illegal alien. You didn't even bring up illegal aliens. I mean, what the fuck, Young Turks? This is despicable to spit on this girl's grave like this. It really is. And I don't know anybody that would go out and be supportive of this memorial burning or this murder. You know, this is barbaric and wrong, and we're saying that it is. We're covering that it is, that this is wrong. Like, I'm doing this video, and I would have, you know, been able to do this video in a lot better way if you didn't have to come out with all this stupid misinformation and you know, faulty attacks that I couldn't overlook and had to correct. Jesus Christ, get your shit together. Have a good one, guys.